Welcome. We are back with This Is Not Advice. I'm Roy Bahat, and I'm here with my co-host, Min.
Hi. We are startup investors and we're answering your questions about the future of work. Today is day 101. We took a week off for election week. And today we are talking about focus. And this week on advice, that this is not advice, we're going to answer as an early stage founder, can I address two customer segments at the same time? Can I do that wrong?
I mean, I'll tell you the reasons, and I've written a little bit about this, but no, with a couple of exceptions. So we're talking about really early companies, like just getting product market fit. And we just had this conversation with the founder who we backed last week and started to hear these things that we often hear, which is, number one, well, it's mostly the same product and technology. And in early startups, unless the end-to-end process is the same, meaning how you get the customer, what the customer wants, how often you communicate with them, the style in which you and your team communicate with them, the mode in which you communicate with them, the fact that like the software that you ultimately offer is the same, it's not similar enough. And my general view on focus is all the returns to focus in the beginning come at the extremes. So founders often feel that they're very focused. They're like, what do you mean? I'm not going B2B and B2C. Of course I'm focused. It's like, okay, but you chopped off half the world. But what if you need to chop off 99% of the world? And the analogy that came out in conversation was, we often like to say, yeah, I know it's diluting when you defocus. And I think that's the wrong analogy, because what it implies is you have this liquid of focus something, and you add a little water to it, it just becomes a little less focused. I don't think it's like that. I think it's more like food coloring. You have your liquid and you add in some different food coloring, a couple of drops changes the whole thing. And so I think that is why in general, no, you cannot. Specifically in the case of different customer types, I do think there's one time when you can. And that's when you're not sure who your focus customer type is going to be at the beginning, who your first customer will be. And then you're in discovery mode. And then what you're really doing is trying to figure out who your first customer is. And could you bake two off against each other for a short period of time? Absolutely. Could you do 20 different ones in different ways? Maybe. I mean, I think that depends on what the experiment involves. And that is related to what business you're in, which we'll talk about another time. But basically, if you're in the like slow burn enterprise sales business, you're selling $500,000 contracts with some deeply integrated thing, then you probably can't try as many different customer types as once. But if you're in some consumer thing where you have landing pages and you're just pinging out emails to people, sure, try infinite different types of customers at once. So generally no, subject to unless you're in discovery.
And I feel like we've talked about like, when do you decide to choose? And like I don't know, I feel like we've spoken with founders like, well, how much traction is enough traction where you decide that you're going to focus on one over the other? And there isn't like a clear-cut answer to that one, but like, what would you recommend?
So this is definitely a kind of a question that is, how long is a piece of string? Because you can't give it with clarity. That said, I would always examine the reasons. To me, the default assumption is focus, and the reasons not to focus, like that, the burden of proof is on the reasons not to focus. And oftentimes it's like, well, might not work. Well, it's like, okay, but you're less likely to succeed if you don't focus. And sometimes I think the device to use is, imagine you believed you should focus right now, and a skeptical member of your team said, no, what about X? What would you need to say in order to persuade them? And then go figure those things out.
Okay, so you heard it here, not advice given. Remember, we call it This Is Not Advice, because advice is usually people telling you how to live your life or their life and their business, and we want you to be empowered to find your own answers. So if you have other questions you want us to answer, reply to us down below. And Roy?
We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to keep talking about focus all week. We just talked about types of customers. Now we'll talk about a close cousin, which is business models, revenue streams. To be continued.
To be continued. Bye.
Bye.